The vampire king pretended to sleep to test the maid, but what she did in the dark left him frozen. From the highest battlements to the deepest dungeons, shadows clung to every corner, as if the stones themselves remembered every secret ever spoken within. This was the domain of Lord Kale, the vampire king, a being of power and patience, feared by many, admired by none, yet centuries of solitude had taught him the value of observation. On this night Kale lay in his private chamber, the silken sheets pulled over his chest, his eyes closed. But he was not asleep. He never truly slept. He was testing the household, watching for the faintest sign of honesty, bravery, or betrayal among his staff. The castle was vast, and among the servants only a few were truly worthy of trust. Most flinched at his name or whispered rumors in the hallways. Yet tonight, a maid named Elara would cross his attention. Elara moved silently through the hall, her bare feet whispering across the cold stone floor. She carried a tray of candles to the chamber doors, unaware, or perhaps daringly aware, that eyes were upon her. She had arrived at the castle only a month ago, yet already she had learned its rhythms, its hidden dangers, and the subtle moods of its master. Unlike the others, she did not flinch when the shadows shifted unnaturally, or when the wind seemed to carry whispers from unseen mouths. As she entered the king's chamber, the air seemed heavier, almost electric. The room was grand, yet austere, black velvet drapes, silver candelabras, and tapestries that told stories of wars long ended. She placed the candles on the bedside table, her hand steady. From the corner of her eye, she noticed the faint rise and fall of Kale's chest. He was asleep, or at least pretending to be. Elara knelt to light the candles, careful not to disturb the sheets. Her mind wandered briefly to the rumors whispered among the servants. The vampire king tests all who enter his halls. Few survive his scrutiny. She did not fear, but curiosity pricked at her heart. What test awaited her? Kale's eyes opened slightly beneath his lids, a pale glimmer reflecting the candlelight. He had watched her since she entered, noting her movements, her composure. There was something about her, an honesty, a quiet strength, a spark that refused to be dimmed by fear or awe. She was unlike any human who had served him in centuries. As she finished arranging the candles, a gust of wind swept through the room, making the flame flicker. Elara's hand hovered for a moment, instinctively steadying the nearest candelabra. Kale's lips curved slightly, though he remained still. She had acted not out of fear, not out of obedience, but out of instinct. That was rare. Once her work was complete, she turned to leave. Yet something held her gaze on the king. His form was still, almost statuesque, yet she sensed the subtle tension, the quiet attention. In that suspended moment, she felt the weight of centuries, the history embedded in the walls, and the silent watchfulness of the one who ruled it all. Kale remained motionless, pretending sleep, but his mind raced. How could someone so mortal hold such composure? She was not the first servant to serve him, and yet she was already different. Intrigue flickered within him, a dangerous emotion that had no place in his long, calculated life. Elara returned to her duties quietly, tending to other rooms in the castle. She noticed small things, doors that never opened before, faint runes carved into the stone, shadows that moved without source. She did not speak aloud. She did not panic. Instead, she simply observed, storing every detail in her mind. Later that night, Kale decided to escalate his test. A forbidden book, bound in black leather and etched with silver symbols, was left deliberately on the table where she would see it. Its contents were not for the faint-hearted, spells of binding, curses, and ancient histories. Most servants would have recoiled, abandoned it, or sought to destroy it in fear. Elara entered the chamber once more, carrying fresh linens. The book caught her eye, its aura strange and almost alive. She knelt beside it, her fingers brushing the cover lightly. She did not tremble, she did not step back. Instead, she placed a small, protective charm, one she had kept hidden on her person near the book. She whispered softly, a murmur only meant to shield, not to wield. Cale's breath caught. Frozen in the shadows, he watched as she acted. Her gesture was not one of fear or obedience, but of courage, of respect, of intuition. For centuries, he had seen mortals act out of fear, desire, or greed. Few acted with such clarity of spirit. In that instant, Cale understood something he had long forgotten, the rare, unyielding courage of someone untouched by centuries of darkness. The night deepened, and Alara continued her rounds, unaware of the eyes that followed her every move. Cale remained still, yet the tension in the room was palpable. For the first time in hundreds of years, he felt an emotion that was neither hunger nor power. It was fascination, laced with admiration, and something dangerously close to longing. Days passed and Cale continued his silent observation. He tested her subtly, leaving minor tasks that seemed trivial but revealed character. A spilled candle, a fallen vase, the whispered sound of a door opening, all became instruments of his test. And each time, Alara navigated the trials with grace, intelligence, and a quiet audacity that unsettled him. One evening, she entered the library to dust the shelves. The air was thick with the scent of aged parchment and ink. Cale's presence was almost tangible, though he remained hidden. Alara paused at a high shelf, noticing a small, intricate key tucked between volumes. She hesitated for only a heartbeat before reaching for it. Something deep within her stirred, a connection she could not name. Cale's eyes narrowed slightly. This was no ordinary act of curiosity. There was a courage in her hands, a decisiveness that mirrored the instincts of those who had once shaped kingdoms. He had ruled long, and yet he had never felt challenged in this way. Her presence was a puzzle, and he was drawn to it. Night after night, the tests continued. Cale left small trials, tiny sparks of danger and temptation, watching as she navigated each one. And each night he discovered more about her. She was brave, clever, and unexpectedly compassionate. She did not fear him, yet she respected him in a way that made him pause. Then came the night that would change everything. A storm raged outside the castle, lightning splitting the sky and rain hammering the stone walls. Cale left a private letter near her quarters, an innocuous-looking scroll, yet it contained words that could ignite chaos if misused. Most mortals would flee, panic, or seek help. Alara entered, sensing the storm's fury but also drawn by curiosity. Her fingers brushed the scroll, and instead of recoiling, she placed it in a secure box, whispered protective words, and left the room. Cale, watching from a hidden vantage, felt something freeze inside him. Her act was simple, yet it revealed a depth of character, intuition, and strength that even he could not predict. In the quiet aftermath of the storm, Cale finally allowed himself a moment of reflection. He had spent centuries observing, testing, and manipulating. Yet Alara had done what none before her could. She had acted without fear, without expectation, guided only by her own moral compass. For the first time in hundreds of years, Cale felt a stirring of vulnerability. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. He realized that this mortal Maid, this young woman who walked lightly through his shadows, had awakened something in him long thought buried. The night ended with the castle silent once more, yet the air was charged with unspoken tension. Alara, unaware of the eyes that had followed her every step, returned to her chamber, exhausted but proud. Cale, hidden in the darkness, remained awake, unable to sleep even if he had wanted to. He had glimpsed something rare, something that defied centuries of rules, power, and solitude. And in that quiet, storm-swept castle, a connection began, a fragile, dangerous bond between the immortal king and the mortal maid who dared to act with courage in the dark. The first part closes on the night when Cale finally realizes that his centuries of testing may have met their match. He is frozen, not by fear or anger, but by something far more complicated: admiration, fascination, and the haunting awareness that Alara is no ordinary mortal. Cliffhanger. And for the first time, he fears the outcome, not for himself, but for the one who has unknowingly challenged the Vampire King's centuries of solitude. The castle seemed alive in the deep hours of night. The wind rattled the iron-framed windows, carrying the scent of rain-soaked stone and distant forests. Shadows pooled in the corners of halls, and the faint hum of magic clung to the air. Lord Kale had not slept. He had watched Alara through every quiet movement, every soft step in the castle, and now curiosity had transformed into something more potent, an unspoken fascination that tugged at the edges of his immortal heart. Alara, unaware of the eyes that had followed her through countless nights, had begun to feel the castle's pulse as if it spoke directly to her. Every hallway, every chamber seemed to hold a secret meant for her eyes alone. She had grown more confident in her movements, more attuned to the subtle dangers that lurked in shadows. And yet, she could not ignore the strange feeling that someone, or something, was always watching. It was during one of her routine dustings in the Grand Library that Kale decided to break the silence. The massive doors creaked softly as he appeared at the far end of the room. His presence so commanding it made the candles flicker as if acknowledging him. Alara froze, clutching the feather duster in her hand, but she did not flee. "My lord," she said, her voice steady though laced with curiosity. Kale's eyes, pale and ancient, regarded her with a mixture of intensity and intrigue. "Alara," he said, his voice like the low echo of distant thunder, "do you know why I observe you so closely?" She paused, unsure how much to reveal. Yet she sensed that honesty more than fear would guide her through this encounter. "I do not, my lord," she admitted softly. "I can only do my best to serve and to understand." A faint smile touched Kale's lips, almost imperceptible. "Most would speak out of fear or lie to please me. You do not. That is unusual." Alara felt a strange warmth at his words, though it was tempered by caution. She had heard tales of the Vampire King's cruelty, of servants tested to the brink. And yet here he stood, silent and imposing, yet not hostile. Something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of bravery, of intelligence, of untapped potential. The night deepened, and Kale decided to reveal a fragment of the castle's hidden past. He led her, silently, to a corridor rarely visited by anyone but himself. The walls were carved with symbols, old as time, glowing faintly in the darkness. "These runes mark the power that protects this castle," he explained. "Few mortals can even sense it. You, however," he paused, studying her, "you seem attuned." Alara's heart beat faster. She had always sensed more than she could explain, a strange pull toward forces she didn't fully understand. And now, standing in the presence of the king, she felt a connection to the magic that pulsed through the stones themselves. Before she could speak, a sudden chill swept the hallway and shadows gathered unnaturally, thickening around them. Kale's posture shifted subtly, a predator alert to an intruder. Alara's eyes widened, but she did not step back. A dark figure emerged from the corridor's depths, a rival vampire lord, his presence sharp and hostile, eyes gleaming with hunger for power. He had come for Kale, seeking to challenge centuries of dominance and claim the castle as his own. Kale's expression hardened, the flicker of fascination replaced by the ice of command. "Stay behind me," he instructed softly, though his eyes never left hers. He knew the danger this rival posed, yet he also sensed something within Alara, a courage, a spark that might tip the scales in the coming confrontation. The rival advanced, his movements swift and calculated. Kale stepped forward, his presence commanding the room, his centuries of power palpable. Alara remained silent, observing, calculating. She did not tremble. Instead, she instinctively positioned herself near the enchanted runes along the walls, subtly activating protective energies she barely understood. The air vibrated with power, responding to her touch. Kale's eyes widened. You are stronger than I imagined," he whispered, a mixture of awe and disbelief threading through his tone. The rival lunged, but the protective runes flared in response, momentarily halting him. Kale moved like a shadow, precise and lethal, his centuries of combat experience evident in every gesture. And yet, he found himself relying on Alara in ways he never expected, not for strength, but for intuition. Her movements, her choices, her fearless awareness guided him, complemented his centuries of experience. The battle was swift, a dance of shadow and light. Kale struck with deadly grace, and Alara maneuvered with intelligence and courage, keeping herself and him safe from the rival's cunning attacks. Each time the enemy advanced, she anticipated and countered, as if the castle itself lent her guidance. Finally, the rival retreated, wounded and cautious, disappearing into the stormy night. Kale's chest heaved slightly, the adrenaline of centuries-old combat coursing through him. He turned to Alara, and for the first time his expression was not one of command or curiosity, but genuine wonder. "You risked much tonight," he said quietly. "Most would have fled, most would have panicked. Yet you," his voice faltered, caught in a thread of emotion he rarely allowed himself. "You are remarkable." Alara, cheeks flushed with the storm's adrenaline, met his gaze steadily. "I did what I could," she said softly. "I am not afraid of darkness if it protects those who must endure it." Kale's pulse quickened, not in blood, for he needed none, but in the stirrings of an emotion he had long believed dead. Fascination, admiration, and a dangerous tenderness swirled within him. In centuries, he had never met anyone like her. The next days were filled with quiet tension. Kale continued his observation, but now it was tempered by respect. He no longer tested her as before. Instead, he began to share fragments of the castle's hidden history, stories of fallen kingdoms, of curses bound in stone, of the heavy solitude of immortality. Alara listened, enraptured yet composed. She asked questions not to pry but to understand. Her curiosity was genuine, her insight subtle and thoughtful. Kale realized that she was not simply learning about the castle, she was understanding him, in ways words could not fully capture. One evening, as twilight bled into the castle halls, Kale invited her to the moonlit balcony. The wind was fierce, tossing her hair, carrying the scent of the distant forest. He stood silently beside her, an imposing figure softened by the night's light. "The castle tests all who enter," he said quietly. "Few survive its trials, fewer still survive me." His voice was low, almost a whisper, yet it carried centuries of weight. Alara met his gaze, unflinching. "Then perhaps I am not like others," she replied softly. "Perhaps I am meant to face it and to understand." Kale's breath caught. She did not say this to flatter, to deceive, or to seek favor. She said it because she believed it, because it was truth, and that honesty was rarer than loyalty or skill. In her eyes he saw clarity, a light he had long thought extinguished in mortals. The night continued in silence, broken only by the distant sound of thunder. Kale's hand hovered near hers, but he did not touch. Respect and caution warred with desire. He had lived centuries ruling through fear, through power, through control. Yet now, for the first time, he felt the fragile, dangerous stirrings of connection. And then came a discovery that shook them both. While exploring a hidden chamber beneath the castle, Alara found an ancient sigil glowing faintly on the floor. She instinctively traced it with her fingers, whispering protective words she had never known she could speak. The sigil responded, brightening in acknowledgement. Kale, watching silently from the shadows, froze. You can sense it," he breathed, awestruck. "This power, you were born with it, yet you have no idea how rare it is." Alara stepped back, startled but composed. I only followed what felt right," she admitted. "I did not know it would do this." Kale's mind raced. If she could interact with the castle's magic so effortlessly, if she could act with such courage and clarity under pressure, then she was not merely a maid, a mortal, or a servant. She was something far more significant, a force that could either preserve or change the kingdom, the castle, and him. The storm outside intensified, lightning illuminating the battlements, rain hammering against the stone. In that moment, Cale realized the truth he had long denied. He was no longer merely observing her. He was invested, emotionally, dangerously, irrevocably. And Alara, unaware of the full extent of her impact, continued to move through the castle with courage, grace, and quiet defiance, unknowingly unraveling centuries of solitude and testing the heart of the vampire king itself. Cliffhanger. Cale sensed it before it revealed itself, and for the first time in centuries he feared, not for himself, but for the one who had unknowingly captured his attention, his fascination, and perhaps his heart. The storm had passed, leaving the castle drenched and glistening under the pale light of the full moon. The stone walls shimmered like silver in the quiet, the air still thick with the scent of rain and earth. Yet the castle was far from peaceful. Cale's instincts were taut, every shadow a potential threat. Alara had sensed it too, the lingering tension, the weight of forces unseen but palpable. Cale led her to the inner sanctum, a chamber few had ever entered. The walls were etched with centuries of protective spells, the floor engraved with sigils that pulsed softly with a quiet light. He studied her as she stepped cautiously inside, noting the way her eyes absorbed every detail, how her hands moved almost instinctively over the enchanted symbols. "You have grown stronger in ways I did not expect," he said quietly. "The castle recognizes you as I do. There is a rare power within you, one that could change everything." Alara's breath caught. She had felt a connection to the castle before, but she had never realized the full extent of it. I do not know what this power means," she admitted. "I only know I can feel it. I can sense what must be protected." Cale's expression softened. "And that is enough. Sometimes intent matters more than knowledge." A sudden rumble echoed through the castle, deeper than the storm. Cale's senses sharpened. From the shadows of the halls beyond, the rival vampire lord from before returned, not alone. A contingent of dark creatures, followers drawn to his power, now stalked the castle, seeking to claim it and its master. "Alara," Cale said, his voice firm but low, "you must stay close to me. There is danger here, one that will test both your courage and your heart." Alara nodded, a spark of determination in her eyes. She did not hesitate, did not falter. "I will not run," she said. "I will stand." The corridors became a battlefield of shadow and echo. The creatures advanced with unnatural speed, their eyes gleaming with hunger. Cale moved with lethal precision, his centuries of experience allowing him to strike with devastating efficiency. Yet it was Alara who surprised him most. She moved with intuition, activating runes along the walls, whispering protective charms that repelled their attackers. Her courage was not reckless, it was deliberate, informed by a clarity that even Cale admired. One creature lunged toward her, its claws sharp and merciless. Cale intercepted it effortlessly, but Alara acted first, her hands glowing faintly with the castle's latent magic. She whispered words older than the stones themselves, and the creature recoiled as if bound by invisible chains. Cale froze, his breath caught not by fear but by astonishment. "You," he murmured, almost to himself. "You are unlike any mortal I have ever known." Alara's eyes met his, steady and unwavering. "I do not seek to be like anyone else," she said. "I only seek to do what is right." The battle raged, but Cale and Alara became a seamless force. His strength and experience complemented her instinct and connection to the castle's magic. Together, they drove the intruders back, sealing doors and activating ancient wards that had remained dormant for centuries. The rival vampire, realizing his advantage had been lost, retreated into the night, leaving the castle intact but tense with lingering energy. When silence finally fell, Kale and Alara stood in the grand hall, breathing heavily, their forms illuminated by flickering candlelight and moonbeams. For a long moment, neither spoke. Words felt unnecessary. Their bond had solidified not through command or dominance but through trust, courage, and shared struggle. Kale's gaze softened as he studied her. "Alara," he began, his voice lower, carrying centuries of weight, "you have changed everything. You have challenged me in ways I never expected. You have reminded me that strength is not only in power but in heart, in courage, in loyalty that is freely given." Alara blushed, though her composure remained. "I did what I could," she said simply. "I did not know it would change anything." Kale stepped closer, the centuries of solitude in his posture softened by something new, fragile yet fierce. "It has changed everything," he said. "For the first time in hundreds of years, I feel something beyond command or hunger. I feel connection, I feel hope." She looked up at him, sensing the depth of his words. "Hope?" she asked quietly. "Yes," he said, his eyes reflecting the silver moonlight. "Hope that there can be more than fear, more than solitude, more than shadows that bind us. I see now that even the darkest hearts can be touched by light, if it is given freely, without demand, without expectation." The castle itself seemed to acknowledge their bond. The shadows softened, the walls pulsed gently with protective magic, and the air carried a quiet hum, as if the ancient stones approved of this rare union of trust and courage. Kale extended his hand, a silent invitation. "Stay with me, Alara," he said. "Not as servant or subject, but as equal. I cannot promise a life free of danger, but I can promise truth and the protection of this castle and of myself." Alara felt the weight of centuries in his words, and yet it was not fear she felt. It was understanding, acceptance, and something deeper, a sense that her courage, her choices, and her heart had mattered. She placed her hand in his, a quiet affirmation of trust and willingness. "I will stay," she whispered. "I will stand with you not because I must, but because I choose to." Kale's lips curved in a rare, genuine smile. It was not arrogance or command. It was relief, admiration, and the soft edge of something he had thought lost forever, vulnerability. The night deepened, and the castle grew quiet once more. But the peace was not fragile. It was born of understanding and shared strength. Kale and Alara had faced danger, tested each other, and emerged changed, not only as individuals but together, as allies bound by courage, trust, and something that could only be called the beginning of love. Yet even in this calm, Kale sensed the currents of fate shifting. Alara's true power, her lineage, and the mysteries of the castle were not fully revealed. There were forces beyond the rival vampire, forces older and darker, that watched and waited for the right moment to challenge them. Kale, for the first time, welcomed the uncertainty. Not because he sought danger, but because he now had someone beside him who could face it. They walked together to the balcony, the wind tugging gently at their clothes, the moon casting silver light over the stone parapets. Kale's hand brushed hers instinctively, a small gesture that carried centuries of longing and restraint. "You have awakened something in me I thought was long dead," he said quietly, "and I am no longer afraid of it." Alara smiled, her eyes reflecting the moon. "Then we face whatever comes together," she said, Kale's lips curved in approval. "Together," he echoed, his voice low and steady. For a long moment they stood in silence, two figures silhouetted against the moonlight, bound not by fear, not by power, but by mutual understanding, courage, and an unspoken promise. The castle, the centuries, the shadows, they no longer seemed like walls or threats. They were witnesses to a bond that transcended time, darkness, and even immortality itself. Cliffhanger/closing hook. In the deepest dungeons where the oldest magic slept, a glow ignited, an omen of power and mystery yet to be revealed. Kale and Alara, standing together, felt its pull. They knew their trials were not over. The night had tested them, the castle had revealed them, but the future awaited, full of danger, transformation, and the promise of a bond that could defy even the darkest of shadows. And for the first time in centuries, Kale welcomed it, not alone, but with someone who had awakened his heart and soul.